In exercise 4, you are looking at Introduction to Epidemiology. If you recall, in lab you had a synthetic epidemic in which you exchanged simulated body fluids with other students in the class. And the purpose was to determine how quickly an infection could spread and to see if you can uncover the index patient in this case. The objectives for this assignment is to understand and apply terminology used in epidemiology. In part 1, you'll be getting a handout, and in that handout you'll have all the class members' names and their results for the synthetic epidemic. You're going to review the results of this classroom epidemic and trace each positive student back to the possible source or sources of infection. So you'll have to do a little detective work here. From that, you should be able to narrow down to 1 or 2 people who may be the index patient. You're going to write the name of the index patient on your assignment sheet and explain how you determined this. Remember, it may not be possible to narrow this down to 1 student. It depends on how aggressively that student started out exchanging, the index case started exchanging their body fluids. If they hung back for a little while, you may be able to narrow it down to 1 person. But if they very quickly started exchanging between other students, you may not be able to narrow it down to 1, but should be able to narrow it down to 2. For the second part of this assignment, you're going to take a virtual vacation. You're going to go to the CDC's website, cdc.gov/travel/, and on this website you're going to have a variety of destinations to choose from. Pick wherever you might be interested in going. Maybe it's someplace that you've always dreamed of going. Maybe it's someplace a loved one is going to go soon, such as Afghanistan. You'll see there's a drop-down menu on this website, and you can choose a destination from this drop-down menu. You'll arrive at a page that gives you the information necessary for questions 3, 4, 5, and 6 in part 1. Number 3, you're going to look at the vaccines that the CDC recommends. Number 4, what you should do to avoid getting sick while you are there. Number 5, what you should pack. And that doesn't mean your bathing suit. We're talking about health and wellness here. And then number 6, is there anything you should do regarding your health when you return? After you've done that, you're going to switch to the clinician view because you're going to get more detailed information in this part of the web page for questions number 1 and 2. In question number 1, it asks, while you are visiting this area, what diseases are you most likely to encounter? So this doesn't necessarily mean there is a current epidemic of these diseases, but these diseases are endemic or naturally found in these areas. And secondly, are there currently any epidemics or outbreaks you should be aware of? There may not be, but you should pay attention if there are epidemics or outbreaks that you should be aware of. And this would be a very good infection for you to research for the next part. Now, in completing the table, you'll see that you have several different columns that you have to fill out. You're going to choose 3 diseases from questions 1 or 2. Either one is fine. And if you have nothing for question 2, pick something from question 1. Choose 3 diseases and you are going to research them. It will require you to do internet research. I recommend the CDC website. It has excellent resources. You'll have to go very few other places if you limit yourself to the CDC. And if you are going to go somewhere else to do your searches, such as Google, be very specific with your search string. For example, if you are looking at the disease malaria, the etiologic agent or the causal agent of malaria can be found very simply by typing in a very specific search string that says etiologic agent of malaria or reservoir of malaria, the type of transmission of malaria. You'll get much stronger hits if you do it this way rather than just typing in malaria. Now again, the CDC webpage is going to be one of your best resources. So let's take a look at what's going to go into each of these columns. The first column is the etiologic agent. Etiologic means causal. So you're going to discover the causal agent of the disease. Now, there may be a specific species of the organism depending upon the region of the world. For example, there are 4 different species of Plasmodium that cause malaria. So you want to look at the specific species that are found, let's say if you're going to West Africa, as opposed to perhaps going to Brazil. Okay. Remember, you're going to be putting the genus and species, and remembering that the genus and species are going to be italicized or underlined if you're writing this out. Genus is capitalized, species is lowercase. Now, a word on viruses. Viruses are not classified by genus and species. You may find a family name for a virus. For example, the morbillivirus causes measles, but it's also called the measles virus. The dengue fever virus is called the dengue virus. You may find another family name for that. Either one would be acceptable. The second column is classification of the agent. Is this agent a bacterium, a virus, a worm, or a helminth, a fungus, a protist, or a prion? Put that in the column next to the etiologic agent. Next comes the mode of transmission. The idea behind this assignment is for you to use the terminology that we use in epidemiology. So you want to describe how the disease is transmitted. So, for example, if you eat contaminated food, eating contaminated food is a fecal-oral transmission. Now, for many diseases, there can be multiple modes of transmission. So if that is the case, number the modes of transmission so you can match them up in the next column. So if number 1 becomes fecal-oral transmission, the type of transmission in the next column for number 1 would be indirect. Fecal-oral transmission is an indirect type of transmission. So you're going to have a mode of transmission and maybe multiple modes of transmission for each disease you're looking up, and then you'll match that up with the type of transmission in the next column. Is it indirect or direct? Horizontal or vertical? Okay, vertical means it's passed from mother to child, either across the placenta or through breast milk. Again, if there are multiple modes of transmission, match them up to the previous column. The next column is vector. Not every disease is going to have a vector, but many of them do. Vectors can either be classified as biological or mechanical. A biological vector is necessary to the life cycle of the infectious organism. For example, as you see on the left here, the mosquito. The mosquito transmits many infectious diseases, including malaria, dengue fever, types of lentiviruses, and this vector, the mosquito, is actually necessary for the life cycle of the organism. Plasmodium, for example, is the etiologic agent of malaria, and this organism requires to be in the mosquito for part of its life cycle. The same with Lyme disease. Lyme disease is transmitted by a tick, a specific tick. If you're looking at Lyme disease in this assignment, look up what type of tick can transmit Lyme disease. The tick is an active part of the life cycle of the bacterium that causes Lyme disease. We also can find mechanical vectors. Mechanical vectors are things like gnats or flies. Gnats, for example, can buzz around and land on your mucous membrane, such as on your eyes, and can transmit a disease that way. Flies can crawl across fecal material and then crawl across your food and transmit that in an indirect mechanism. So this is a mechanical vector and an indirect transmission, whereas biological vectors are going to be direct transmission. Vectors are always living. They're often insects, but they don't have to be. For example, if you contract salmonellosis from eating undercooked poultry like your Thanksgiving turkey, the vector in this case would be the turkey. Humans are never considered to be vectors. The next column is fomites. Fomites are always non-living. They are inanimate. They're things like a tabletop, doorknobs, computer keyboards, keys. These would be surfaces upon which a microorganism or a virus could be found, and by touching that surface and then touching indirectly your eyes or your mouth would then transmit that organism to you. Vehicles are food and water which are consumed, or biological products. For example, if you get stuck with a needle and in that needle was blood that carried HIV, the needle would be a fomite, but the blood would be a vehicle. In the case of vehicles, if you consume contaminated water or contaminated food, this would be a vehicle. You perhaps remember the Chi-Chi's outbreak in 2003 in Beaver, in which people were sickened by hepatitis A virus, and the vehicle in that case was green onions. Finally, there's a reservoir. The reservoir is the place where the organism persists naturally in the environment. Reservoirs can be living or they can be non-living. Humans can be reservoirs. For example, syphilis is a disease only of humans, and therefore the reservoir for syphilis is humans. Vectors can also be reservoirs. For example, with malaria. In malaria, the Plasmodium protist is going to survive in the mosquito, and consequently the mosquito is a reservoir. It's very difficult to eradicate malaria because you have to not only eradicate this reservoir of the vector, but you also have to eradicate other reservoirs, and your research will show you that there are other reservoirs for malaria. So you will have a reservoir for every single disease microorganism that you look at in this assignment. You may not have a vector, a fomite, or a vehicle, but you definitely will have a reservoir. Make sure to be specific in your search string when you are looking for the reservoir for the particular organism. And sometimes it really helps, rather than putting in your search string malaria reservoir, to actually put Plasmodium reservoir, or the actual name of the organism, because you're going to get more specific results. If there is no vehicle or no fomite for the disease that you are looking at, remember to put NA, N/A, in the box. Don't just leave it blank, because I'll think you didn't look it up. Good luck, and if you have any questions, please contact me.